Right back where we left off. Welcome back. And thank you for tuning in again. I tell these stories because they're real life stories, real life experiences, real life thoughts. And a lot of this stuff is close and personal to me, but I really appreciate the fact that you guys appreciate that I share this stuff. To those of you who did all that stuff that comes with these channels, with the likes and the comments and the shares and the saves, it's a breath of fresh air to know that there's other people out there who are thinking on the same frequency as I am. So thanks to you guys who have subscribed. That just tells me that I need to keep doing what I'm doing. And then there's those of you who pop up and say you want to be part of it. I'm open if there's value added, 100%. But that brings me to this story that I want to tell you today, the thing that's been on my mind all week. I know this family, and just like any other family, there's millions of families. You guys can relate, I can relate, all over the planet that are going through some things. Nobody's dying, nobody's life is over, there's no tragedy, nobody's sick right now. Although there's been some stuff in the past, and of course there's going to be some things that happen in the future. This is just a normal family trying to figure out how to be a family, while everybody inside the family is trying to figure out how to operate their own lives. And I've been watching it. And sometimes they call me and ask me questions, and those questions come from different perspectives and different angles. And sometimes it's not a group conversation. Most of the time it's not a group conversation, but I want to make it one. So I've been watching and listening and talking to different people and really trying not to decide too quickly who's right or who's wrong. Because the more I dive into it and look at it, I realize that there is no right or wrong. The fact of the matter is that everybody within this family is evolving and changing. On one side, there's this young man in the family, talented guy, man. Creative. He got accepted at a very early age to go to one of the best schools in the country that focus on video and audio design, production from all aspects of digital and music and sound, all the stuff that comes with that. So he's been able to work on that side of the brain, that creative side of the brain. But now things have changed. He's in his mid-20s now, and that thing that's his God-given talent isn't putting food on the table. Is it still work in progress? Is it still growing? Yeah, absolutely. Is he still connected in all these areas where he's established friendships and built relationships with people that are like-minded and thinking within the same stratosphere as him? Yeah, but he has responsibilities and he has to take care of those responsibilities. Being independent isn't easy, especially in today's society. So he decided to change things up and do something completely different. He enrolled into a technical school where he gets to learn how machines actually work. And his world is mathematical and technical and precise, and it's extremely uncomfortable and sometimes kicking his ass. He'll call me sometimes and be like, hey man, oh man, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't know if I've made the right connections, or I don't know if I'm making the right decisions right now. So that tells me that he's extremely uncomfortable. But when you're uncomfortable, you're learning something. You're getting your ass kicked. So some days he's extremely confident in what he's doing, and then other days not so much. That's normal. That's what happens when we grow. That's why they call it growing pains, because he's adding something to himself that wasn't there before. Then there's the other side to the story. There's this young woman. She went to college, university level college. She lived some life, had a few setbacks. That's normal. But then when her back was against the wall, she did something that I have the utmost respect for, especially coming from my background. She joined the military. She deliberately put herself in that extremely uncomfortable environment. And I'm not talking about discomfort like being inconvenienced. I'm talking about entering an environment where eventually fear can become part of the job. Absolutely will become part of the job. So I think she's been in the military now for about 2 years. The first year was a little rough. She made mistakes and she had to adjust, but she held the line and she stayed in that environment. She didn't quit because she was learning something bigger than just how to do a job. She was learning accountability, discipline, responsibility, standards, consequences, and what happens to everyone else when only one person in the group doesn't perform well. And she's no expert. That takes years. Not yet. But she's learning how to look at a situation and recognize when something doesn't seem right. Different road, different challenges, same process. And then the reason I'm having this conversation is because recently some friction developed between two people inside of the family. One being the young man and another person in the family. And I'm not just talking about one argument or one bad day. I'm talking about the kind of friction where somebody eventually has to ask, can these two people continue operating this close together without damaging each other? And that's when the young woman stepped in. And when she stepped in, she identified something that she didn't think was working, and she intervened. Maybe to stop something, maybe to protect somebody in the family, or maybe she believed that some distance was necessary between those people. And from what I know, she might be right. But here's the problem. Being right doesn't mean there's no collateral damage, because now her relationship with the young man is taking some damage too. And that's what got my attention. That's why I'm here today. Because everybody in this situation holds value. Everybody is growing. And everybody involved believes that they're responding to something that is real, at least real to them. We always think that somebody has to be a villain in a story when something is broken or when something's going wrong. There doesn't always have to be a bad guy for something to stop working. And that's when I started to think about this young man again and these machines that he's working on and he's learning to operate. When you hear a knock in an engine, you don't just immediately throw the engine out. You do a diagnostic, you check it, you inspect it. Where's the friction? What's carrying too much load? What needs attention? What's changed? And maybe the hardest question out of all of those is the problem where I actually think it is. And that's when it stopped being about this family for me. And just like always, I start digging in and diving into my own life, my relationships, my health, my finances, my career, my creativity, my business, the people I depend on, the people who depend on me. And all of those things require something different to me. And I'm part of every one of those things. So I got to understand my role, not what I think my role is, not what it used to be, not what everybody else expects it to be. What is my role right now in this situation, in this life, in this place, in this organization, in this family, in this business? What value do I bring? Where am I creating friction? Where do I need maintenance? Where do I need to grow? And I think I'm becoming self-aware enough to hear when my own engine is doing the knocking. Because the reality is sometimes everything around me isn't broken. I don't need to try to jump in and fix it. Sometimes I'm the one that's not performing. I just couldn't see it. I couldn't hear it. And if I don't recognize that, eventually everybody around me has to start compensating for something when I should have been taking responsibility for myself. But then there's another side to this. Maybe the goal in this scenario isn't necessarily to keep everybody connected forever in the exact same way. Because people grow up and relationships change, careers change and grow, people move, people develop, responsibilities around you change. And sometimes people just need space. I know I need space sometimes. You do. We all do. And I think that's okay, because disconnection does not always have to mean rejection. You don't have to feel rejected when you disconnect from somebody. Maybe there's a real test to all this, and that's whether we can create distance when we actually need it, to continue growing and still find a way to operate in harmony. But who determines whether or not you're a certified mechanic to be checking somebody's engines? Because there's something extremely uncomfortable about diagnosing somebody else's life, because it's a hell of a lot easier to hear the knocking coming from somebody else's engine than it is to hear the one that's coming from yours. Because we can always see everybody else's problems. Quick to diagnose that a relationship isn't working, or that a person needs to get their finances together, or he needs to grow up, or she needs to take responsibility, or he needs help, she needs to leave, or they need to communicate better. We could be some damn good mechanics when we're standing over somebody else's engine, can't we? You guilty too. We all are. But what happens when that hood opens and you realize the problem is me? And then before we even get there, there's another question. Who made you qualified to diagnose my problem? Is it your education? Is it your experience? Is it your reputation? Is it your relationship with me? Maybe the results you've produced in your own life? Maybe how long you've known me? Or how much it is that you actually understand about what it is I'm trying to build? Because everybody with an opinion isn't always the right mechanic for the situation. Somebody can love you and still misdiagnose you. Somebody can have years of education and still not understand what they're looking at. And then there's people with no title at all who may know you well enough to recognize a change in you before you ever even recognize a change in yourself. So maybe before I accept someone else's diagnostic, I need to ask myself, do they actually understand what it is I'm trying to build and accomplish? But I've also got a responsibility on the other side of that too. Because sometimes I ask somebody what they think. I don't like the answer, even whenever they're telling me the truth from exactly the way they see it. Now I'm over here angry because I don't like what you found. I'm the one that asked you. You diagnosed it. You told me the truth from your perspective. Now here I am mad, disown you forever for it. I mean, we say we want honest people around us until they become honest. Don't ask somebody to come check under the hood for you if you're just going to hate them for telling you what they find. Now, that doesn't make every diagnosis correct, though. Some people can be wrong. I've been wrong. You've been wrong. We all been wrong about something in life. None of us are perfect. None of us have the expertise like one person upstairs does. Somebody may tell me I'm the problem and they could be wrong. However, if that same problem keeps following me everywhere I go, through every relationship, through every job, different cities, different groups of people, different environments, yet somehow everybody around me keeps describing the same thing. At some point, I gotta ask myself, what's the one thing, the common factor that has been present in every one of those situations? Me. Looking in the mirror and be able to look at yourself and identify problematic areas where adjustments need to be made. That's self-awareness. It's important. That doesn't mean that you got to accept everything that everybody says about you, but don't be rejecting everything either. Learn to look for the patterns, because how do we know when we're becoming a problem? Sometimes results tell us. Other times people will tell us. People will tell us first. Sometimes we feel it, and then a lot of times we don't recognize it until failure keeps repeating itself. Maybe I'm trying to operate in today's environment with yesterday's version of myself. Time for an upgrade. But then here goes another question I got. The environment changed, but did you? Did I? Did we? As families change, technology changes, big business and industries change, relationships change, bodies change, standards change, the world around us changes. So if the environment around us continues to evolve, that means at some point we've got to evolve too. The experience you have over life is extremely valuable, but it can make you stubborn. Because if you start believing, and I've been in these environments for a very, very long time, that because something worked before, it should always work. What made you successful 10 years ago might be the exact same thing that's slowing you down today. Sometimes you just need a little maintenance, a little upgrade. You got the capability, you're just a little worn down. Maybe you've been carrying too much weight. Maybe you haven't recovered. Maybe you've been neglecting something. You don't need to reinvent yourself. You just need some maintenance, man. But like I said, sometimes just a little upgrade doesn't hurt. Requirements do change. Jobs get bigger. The relationship has more substance to it. Your children grew up. The competition got better. Technology moved, developed. The standards continue to increase. And that version of you that was qualified for yesterday may not be qualified for tomorrow. We all like believing that once we've proven ourselves, we're proven. Nah, man, you proved that version of yourself in that environment. And now the environment has changed. Did you? And this young man that I know who's living this right now, super talented, extremely talented, next level talent. He already finished that side of his education, completed it, and now he's continuing to work it day in and day out. And he could have stayed in that environment, that creative side, and just been comfortable and been complacent in a place where he knew he already had some talent, where it was proven. It's been proven. But instead he said, I'm going to walk into a technical school and I'm going to learn something that's uncomfortable, and I'm going to learn how to operate these machines, doing diagnostics, working on systems, trying to earn his way into one of these elite programs. I think Tesla or Mercedes or GMC or something big like that, where there's an internship across the country. But like I said, man, he's getting his ass kicked. And that's good. That's what we want. Not necessarily because we want him to struggle, but because he's discovering something that eventually all of us have to discover. That being good at something doesn't mean you're prepared for everything. Sometimes you got to become a beginner again. And being a beginner doesn't mean something's wrong with you. Sometimes that's just what the upgrade looks like while it's being installed. Every struggle isn't proof that you're in the wrong place. Sometimes you're in recovery mode and you're learning and you're growing. And sometimes you got to admit to yourself and to the world, I'm not qualified yet. Not I can't do it. Not I'm not good enough, just simply I'm not currently equipped to perform at the level that this environment requires me to. That's simply a gap. And if I can self-diagnose and identify a gap, I can work on it through education, through training, experience, communication, reconditioning, discipline, whatever the requirement is. But we also got to be careful, because I'm a prime example. I tried going back to school recently. I already had my bachelor's degree. And for somebody like me, that bachelor's degree might as well have been a damn doctorate, because education was definitely not the priority for me growing up. Not because I didn't have the intelligence, because I always knew there was something going on upstairs. I've been confident in that. But the conditions of the environment around me, the distractions, had me prioritizing other things. Getting a GED became the basic expectation. The minimum ticket, nosebleed seats, into the social and economic construct of our society. Mentality was get the basics, keep moving. And then years later, I earned a bachelor's degree. So that mattered to me. I felt confident and I felt accomplished that I actually got to that point in my life. Wow. Certified. But then recently I tried to go farther. And about 4 months in, I realized something. Yeah, maybe I could do it. But that wasn't even the question anymore. The bigger question was, do I actually need this for the direction I'm trying to go? Because there's a difference between being incapable of succeeding somewhere and then realizing succeeding there is no longer worth what it requires from you. That's not always failure. Sometimes that just means the mission changed. But this don't just apply to an individual. This applies to a lot of things. Take, for example, business. You build something from nothing. And in the beginning, you probably do everything. The development, working the design and the branding, answering the phones, making the calls, building the network, making the decisions, finding customers, solving all the problems, managing all the money, protecting the brand and the reputation. And that might be exactly what the business needs at that stage. Then all of a sudden, boom, it explodes. Now there's employees and customers, technologies, investors, vendors, processes, money moving in all different directions, other people around you that are developing some sort of expertise. And then eventually the person that built the business from the ground up can become the same person slowing it down. Not because they're incompetent or lazy. Obviously they're not. And definitely not because they stopped caring. It's just simple, man. The business evolved. And it's almost impossible to evolve with it individually by yourself alone. Just because you build something doesn't permanently qualify you to do every job inside of it. And maybe one of the hardest things for somebody to do who's built something is to know when to take their hands off of it. Because what's a good measurement on whether or not a business is actually working? Is it revenue? Is it profit or growth? More customers, more employees. All of those are good indicators that you're doing something right. All of those things matter. But here's another test. Can you leave it? Can you step away from it? Doesn't matter how long, a week, a month, 6 months. And will this machine continue operating the way that you built it to operate? Do the people know what to do? Do your customers still get served? Are the problems getting solved? And do the standards still remain? Does the business continue operating without you there? Hands off. Because sometimes, and I used to tell my leaders this all the time, if I show up to your organization and you're not there, will it still operate at the same performance that it was while you were present? Because that's strong evidence that what you built is working and that it no longer needs you involved in everything. Is that uncomfortable for you? We're human, and being needed feels a lot like being valuable, but those two things are not always the same thing. If everything collapses every time I take my hands off the controls, I have to ask myself, did I build something strong, something durable, something that'll last? Or did I just make myself indispensable? And then something else happens. That's when what you built actually starts working. All of a sudden, everybody notices. People who weren't around for the construction suddenly start showing up for the ribbon cutting ceremony. And some of them genuinely have something to contribute. A lot of them have experiences that you don't have, resources that you need, networks, knowledge, and maybe they can help take what you've built somewhere that you could not take it alone. You can't become so protective of what you built that nobody new is allowed inside. But you also can't become so excited about attention that everybody who shows interest gets a damn set of keys. Because there's a difference between someone wanting to contribute to what you've built and then those who want just proximity to something that's finally working. And it's hard. You can't always tell the difference. You just have to watch what they say, watch what they do. What responsibilities are they willing to carry? What happens when nobody's watching? Are they helping build capacity, or are they creating more requirements? And all the while I'm evaluating new people, I got to be careful to not become blind to the people who are already there. Those whose contribution became so consistent that I stopped noticing it. Because sometimes we celebrate the person who shows up with a new idea while overlooking the people who actually been keeping the damn thing running. So don't confuse new energy with new value, and don't confuse familiar value with no value at all. Somebody sent me something the other day, talked about consistency. And when I saw that, it struck a chord, man. Consistency can feel like absolutely nothing, especially when it's been working for a long period of time. And then there's another reality. Sometimes something doesn't need maintenance or an upgrade. Sometimes a component is just simply gone. Somebody dies, serious illness, permanent injury, a person leaves, outgrows, moves on. A resource or a capability disappears, or life changes so dramatically that somebody can no longer perform the role that everybody relied on them to perform. And you can't always repair that. You got to learn how to live differently around the absence. Families do that. Businesses do that. People do that. The hardest part isn't fixing what's broken. The hardest part could be accepting that things may not operate exactly the way they used to. And that requires figuring out what still works right now. That's why a diagnostic matters. Because if you misdiagnose a problem, you can spend years trying to catch up and repair something. Sometimes a lifetime. Sometimes it can never be fixed. You can't always expect things from people that they can no longer provide. And you can actually force somebody into a role that they've already outgrown, or worse. You can start tearing yourself apart because somebody convinced you that you were defective, when the truth is the situation just changed. So now that makes me go back to the family. But I'm looking at it a little bit differently now, because maybe the most interesting thing happening isn't the conflict. Maybe it's the fact that everybody involved is just becoming somebody different. The young man is building and learning, and he's putting himself somewhere unfamiliar. He's trying to add capacity and capability into his life. Meanwhile, the woman is doing the same thing, just different environment, different challenges. But she's deliberately placed herself somewhere where responsibility matters and accountability is a key component, in a place where fear eventually becomes part of the job, while learning that what one person does can affect everybody around them. She's definitely not an expert. She's too young for that. She doesn't have decades of experience, but maybe she has enough experience now to recognize when something isn't right, and that's worth a lot. But recognizing when something is wrong, while at the same time knowing exactly how to fix it, that's two different levels of experience. So yeah, maybe she's right to intervene, or maybe she's not. Maybe the distance is necessary, but maybe it isn't. Or maybe the whole way this thing happened could have been different. I don't know, but that's the point. Because maybe the question isn't who's right or who's wrong. Maybe the better question is, who's everybody becoming? It's been years knowing people by a title. Everybody's got one. Family, friend, partner, leader, wife, husband, father, mother, grandparent, sister, brother, cousin, aunt, uncle, whatever the relationship is. And then sometimes we become familiar with this title to a point that we stop noticing the people carrying these titles have changed. They've experienced things. They've failed at things. They've learned from things. They've recovered from things. They've succeeded at things. They become more capable in some areas and less capable in other areas. Their responsibilities have changed. Their priorities have changed. Their body has changed. But here we are trying to relate to them like they're the same person that we knew 10 years ago. I think that's where all the friction comes from. Because if I don't know who you are right now, how can I really truly understand what role you're capable of playing in my life? And most importantly, how do I know what role am I supposed to be playing in yours? Maybe we confuse relationship with responsibility for the simple fact that we're family. Because I'm family, I think I'm responsible for fixing you. It's because I love you. I think I gotta rescue you. Because I know you forever, I feel like I deserve access to you forever. And because I've always been there, I think that role can never change. I'm oblivious. But what if all those things do change? What if somebody grows, or somebody needs distance, or becomes capable of carrying something that we've been carrying for them? What if helping them today becomes enabling them for tomorrow? And what if protecting somebody starts preventing them from being able to develop? And then what if the person that needs to change is me? And that's exactly where this family became interesting to me. Because maybe the objective isn't deciding which person wins. Maybe it's hoping that everybody involved becomes capable of standing on their own without destroying the relationship that helped them get there in the first place. And maybe that's true outside the family dynamic as well. Because if I'm leading people, am I developing them, or am I making them dependent on me? And if I'm building a business, am I creating systems that can function without me? Or am I creating a place where every decision has to go through me? And if I'm raising somebody, a child, to be an adult, am I doing my job, and can they operate independently? Or am I making myself necessary forever? And for what? And then if I'm in a relationship, am I contributing something valuable? Or am I demanding that someone else compensate for what I refuse to maintain myself? And now there's that other question. What happens when it starts working? When people see the growth, when they see the business, the organization, the family, the team, the life you've been building? And all of a sudden, more people want access to you. Some of them may genuinely make it better and be able to see some things that you can't see, all while bringing the exact capability that's been missing. But some people, they're happy with just standing there when the ribbon gets cut. They think you don't know. That's okay. Welcome. Enjoy yourselves. Be the host. Treat them with respect and dignity, but don't hand them the scissors. So how do we know? How do we stay open enough to recognize someone who can genuinely contribute without becoming so hungry for attention that you hand access to anybody who shows interest? And while you're looking at all these new people that are coming around, how do you ensure that you don't stop seeing the ones who've been there the whole time? Those people who are consistent and dependable, the ones that don't have to announce when they've made a contribution because they've been contributing so long, you stop noticing it. And that's another diagnostic. Not just who's here, but who's contributing. What responsibility do they carry? What happens when things stop getting exciting? When things slow down? What happens when nobody's watching? Would they still want to be here if there was no ribbon cutting? If this thing was just under construction and there was no end in sight? Eventually, if you keep grinding, everything you're building is going to change. People will come, people will go, relationships change, the responsibilities change. Somebody's going to need some maintenance. Somebody's going to need an upgrade. A lot of people will outgrow roles. Somebody new might walk through the door. And eventually, somebody that we thought would always be there, they won't be. So maybe the question isn't, how do we keep everybody together? Maybe it's, how do we keep growing individually without growing so far apart that we forget how to come together? So how do I know when to help, when to coach, when to lead, when to tell the truth, when to provide resources and intervene, when to create distance, when to open the door for somebody new, when to protect people who have already earned their place? Because disconnection doesn't have to mean rejection. And then the hardest question of them all. When do I take my hands off of something that I love and trust that what we've built is strong enough to work without me? Damon Alexander Fonsaluskowski. I swear my thoughts are just my thoughts, and it's a blessing to share them with you. Out of here.